What's up, everybody? Dr. Josh here, clinical psychologist and natural bodybuilder, and I wanted to talk to you all today about the 6 dieting mistakes that I made early on in my bodybuilding career so that you all don't have to make them. So if you're interested in that or anything bodybuilding and psychology related, hit subscribe, and let's get to the episode. Coming in at number 6, overcomplicating peri-workout nutrition. Now, pre-workout nutrition can be a very important aspect of a bodybuilder or any fitness enthusiast career. However, I overcomplicated my pre, during, and post-workout nutrition. And at that point, I still wasn't tracking my macros. Now, this is early on in my career, and I was eating, multiple meals a day. But to be honest with you, the point at which peri-workout nutrition becomes super important is, in my belief, whenever you lock in all the other variables. And to that point, I wasn't tracking anything else. And to be honest, I was just basing my peri-workout nutrition on what I felt and what I read in, well, not magazines, but online forums and things like that. I would take protein before, during, and after workouts. Now, especially if you're not in a severe calorie deficit of any kind, where there is a risk of losing muscle mass around sort of that peri-workout area, your peri-workout nutrition is secondary to your overall calorie and macronutrient profile. So what to do instead, nail your calorie and macro goals, and then focus on pre-workout and post-workout nutrition. And then if you find yourself in a prolonged calorie deficit, possibly start considering some intra-workout carbohydrates or things like that. Now, even when I thought I was hitting particular macros, I wasn't exactly measuring them. And so that is the second mistake I made. I didn't weigh my foods. So for this, I eyeballed portions, I trusted labels and things like that. And I think those things are important skills. I don't think you're going to be tracking your macros forever. But the thing to note here is that for a period of time, especially during contest preparation, it is very helpful to begin weighing your foods so that you don't have to guesstimate what a portion size looks like, especially if you're going to be using foods where the quantities are somewhat ambiguous, like anything in a can. I know the label says something in particular, but there's nothing to say that that label can't be off by a few hundred calories either way based on the weight of the food. And the only way you get that accurate is if you begin measuring things. The things I would do here to begin doing that is get a digital food scale and begin measuring in grams. By measuring in grams, you get the smallest unit of measurement, which is going to be much more accurate, and it allows you to learn and ingrain what certain portions look like. I would say bare minimum, do this for a month. And then if you want to transition away from it, once you sort of can eyeball portion sizes, I think that would be a great idea. And that is what I would do if I had to start over again. Another thing that I did was sort of swinging in between the extremes. So the number 3 thing that I did was if I knew I was in a, well, I guess you could call it a gaining phase at that point, I just ate whatever. And to a degree that worked. It was very useful for putting on weight. But if your goal is to put on the most amount of muscle possible with the least amount of body fat, then tracking is going to be very important. And the other side of that coin is with weight loss. When I was cutting, I would just cut. I would begin to cut out either all the carbohydrates or as many fats as possible, and I would lose a decent amount of weight. But then, even if I wasn't prepping for a show, I cut too much too quickly. I didn't track my weight on a daily and weekly basis, and so I would lose entirely too much weight up front, and then I would get really, really hungry, and then there's a possible binge in there, and it would just cycle back and forth until I was sort of back to my baseline. So the answer to this for me is I would look to lose, whenever I'm cutting, a 0.5% to 1% of body weight per week. Again, it's going to slow down as you get deeper and deeper into a deficit. And then as far as gaining goes, I would look to gain, I don't know, let's see here, 1 to 2% of my beginning body weight per month. So let's say I'm 170 pounds, 10% of that is 17, 1% of that, 1.7, 2% is 3.4 pounds over the course of a month. That's about a pound a week. And I think that that is a reasonable rate to go in terms of gaining muscle and losing body fat. And the number 3 diet mistake that I made was I ate too few foods. Now, I am super guilty of being a very consistent individual when I want to be. Unfortunately, once I find something that works, I kind of just stick to that thing. So by having this mentality, my food options became very, very limited, and I probably wasn't getting as many nutrients as I could have. I would say early on in my bodybuilding career, my foods were chicken, broccoli, sweet potatoes, oats, some kind of clean fat, uh, almond, almond butter, extra virgin olive oil, things like that. I also didn't incorporate very many fruits, and those are very nutrient dense and fibrous. And my recommendation here would just be have a variety of fruits, vegetables, fibrous things, and then mix up your meats from time to time. The penultimate mistake that I made was having too frequent of meals. I think the research has come a long way in terms of how many meals is sort of optimal and or appropriate for building muscles. So I think anywhere in the 3 to 6 range, which could include any amount of pre-workout shake and or post-workout shake within that structure. But early on in my career, I was eating like 6 to 8 meals a day. And to be honest with you, I didn't really enjoy that. I liked larger meals, and sometimes splitting up the meals that way kept meals too small. Fewer meals allows me to be a lot more flexible in other areas of my life, and I think that is part of the longevity or part of having longevity in the sport is that, yes, for a time, you try and fit other areas of your life into bodybuilding, but eventually you realize bodybuilding isn't everything, and you must be flexible and have it fit into other areas of your life, which then this leads me to the ultimate mistake that I had made. I ate entirely too much protein. Thinking back, remember I had said that I didn't track. I was probably in the greater than 300 grams of protein range. Now, I am not a 300-pound individual, nor am I in a severe calorie deficit for the majority of the year. I think there's some good literature to support like 4.2 grams per kilo in the severest of calorie deficits for a prolonged period might be awesome for some people, but like even then, for me at my body weight, at that type of a deficit, probably wouldn't be over 300 grams of protein. So I didn't need to be there. And especially whenever you are in a calorie surplus, you're going to need less protein to maintain. And then by having that much protein, I'm pretty sure I wasn't ingesting, a certain amount of carbohydrates and fats that I could have been ingesting, which might have netted me better performance in the gym. But I didn't need that much protein, which meant I probably spent too much money on protein and I didn't focus on other areas of my nutrition, and I was having to force feed myself at times. So I think anywhere from zero point 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight is more than enough for anyone. I think we are currently to the point where, the bodybuilders were right. Gram per pound of body weight is just about right. And if it's a little bit less, that's okay. And if it's a little bit more and you prefer that, that's also fine too. So my friends, now that you have the 6 mistakes that I wish I had back and that I have learned from today, and I continue to learn from those mistakes, I hope you can go out. I hope you can flourish. I hope you can modify your diet in some way to make it just a bit more optimal. And if you like this info, hit subscribe, leave me a comment about one of your dieting mistakes that maybe you have made that I didn't talk about today, and I will catch you in the next episode.